question?
No.
Lovely.
You're
Okay,
not
so you are under arrest.
true.
So you are under arrest for obstruction of the
Yes.
highway and breach of section 14.
But please,
okay, you do not have to say anything, but it may highly offensive if you do not mention when questioned
I
something
would
related to
like
line
to
of
say
conduct. Anything you do say may be given in evidence.
You're
Okay?
not
The reason for the arrest is to prevent any further offences occurring,
not
such as continued
speaking
obstruction of the highway. Okay? So would you like
it's
to
not
stand up, please?
okay.
So would you like to stand up, please? You need to come with us.
No, I'm not standing up either.
So, come on, let's stand up.
Go.
So you need to stand up, please.
Get back.
Carry the property.
Yeah, we're trying to. That's not right.
Please stop hurting my arm. Hit me. Can you stop hitting me, please? Stand
Oh, this is. They're in the press pits over there, guys. It's been made clear.
Stand up for police, I can search you.
Hello? Press pits over there.
What would it normally be like at this time of the morning here?
Quite busy.
And instead, how do you feel seeing what they've done with the place?
I don't want to sound like an old codger, but I've been coming up nearly 40 years. I've got my son working here, my dad worked here, my other son worked here, and I think it's disgraceful. We haven't caused the problems around the world with whatever they're talking about, all that sort of thing. The environment, it's not caused by us working people, it's caused by governments. And why they're coming to demonstrate against us, possibly putting us out of work. I spoke to a gentleman last week about it, and I said, you give us an alternative, we'll go and do it. Well, this is not an alternative, is it? It's just putting people out of work.
And talk to me about the numbers there, or the impact this will have on the people who work here. They're all, small independent businesses?
Yeah.
How much money is people losing?
Well, it's not that. People are going to lose confidence, aren't they? People are not going to come to the market because they're going to have this because no doubt this won't be the first or the last demonstration. And also, people will lose confidence, they go elsewhere. As I explained to the fella last week, if someone's come to buy lambs up the market and he can't get them here, he'll go somewhere else. It's not going to stop what's going on, because people are still going to want to run their business. If he's got a butcher shop or a factory, he still needs what he needs.
And how do you feel about what they've been doing in there? So there's been music and speeches and a vegan stall, you've got fruit and veg lined up there.
It's just a happy clappy mob, isn't it? And it's not the way. I'm not going to be able to pay my bills, they're not going to be able to pay their bills. They're not interested in. They want to go backwards. It's like, I don't know, Blackadder in there, isn't it? You know, we're going to live on spinach and carrots all through the winter. I don't think so.
And just lastly, what do you think about the police's activity? They've been a lot more heavy-handed this time around than in April.
But the police, they're not police, are they? Security. That's not police. I see it on the news last night. Policemen in a minibus trying to get through. The protesters stopping the police and the police turning round and going another way round. How's that happened? Because I'm pretty sure if I blocked the road in my lorry over there, they'd nick me. Last week I got a parking ticket in a parking bay. You know, if you want to go silly, that's how silly it is, because I was 20 minutes early, but I was in a parking bay. Yet this mob can do anything they like.
And some people who feel it almost as keenly as you are prepared to sleep out in increasingly cold nights and sometimes wet nights as well as part of the Extinction Rebellion protest. Do you support what they've done?
Well, look, I have mixed views on it. I support the cause, clearly. I think that they are right that we face a crisis. I can't think of any other language to use for it. I mean, whether it's climate change, where all the predictions now are terrifying, or whether it's what we're doing to the natural world, which is even more upsetting, I think. The fact that in the figure I gave you about biodiversity loss for the UK is mirrored across the world. 60% of land animals gone in the last 45 years. 1 million species facing extinction. I don't think anyone doubts that. We're losing 47 football pitches worth of forest every single minute. So it is a crisis, and we know you don't have to be a mathematician to know where it's going to end up if this trends continue. So they're right to highlight that. Where I think they're wrong is in the strategy they've used. I just don't think it is clever to attempt to win people over to a gigantic cause by infuriating people going about their daily lives. I think it's strategically not an intelligent way to do it. But I totally sympathise with the reason they're doing it.
So are they crusties, lastly, Mr. Goldsmith?
Sorry, you have to say that again.
Are they crusties?
I'm sure some of them are crusties. But, you know, I'm a Tory minister, and I walked through the Extinction Rebellion just doing my own job, going from department to department, and, you know, you'd have thought I'd be a pretty prime target, but I met nothing but civilised people. People wanted to talk about issues.
Sorry, is that in the House of Commons, or is that...
No. If I was talking about the House of Commons, it'd be a very different story.
I was going to say, that must be the protest, not where you work.
I give the House of Commons a wide berth nowadays. But the streets were... I mean, I know there have been a lot of arrests, but I can't square that with what I've seen.
Please stop hurting my arm. Hit me. Can you stop pushing me, please?
This is land. The press pit's over there, guys. It's been made clear.
Stand up for police, I can touch.
Hello? Press pit's over there.
It's sort of a cynical exploitation of a horrible tragedy when somebody was or a couple of people have been knifed and murdered. At the end of the day, what you're saying, what the question implies, is that because there's a lot of people out there protesting peacefully, they're somehow responsible for the decisions by the police to allocate people to suppress a peaceful rebellion.
Right.
I think the question itself is just completely wrong-headed and is exploiting a tragedy.
Well, let me explain something to you. While it's peaceful, it's hugely disruptive, not allowing people to depart an airport on an aircraft. So you have to throw huge resources at that. While it is, of course, not going to necessarily cause any injury, gluing yourself to the doors of the Department of Transport means that those workers can't get in and out of their offices, and on and on and on it goes. Trying to close bridges causes enormous frustration. That is why the police have had to hit it with those big numbers.
All right, so Nick, what you're saying is that you, perhaps, and the police believe it's more important to allocate those resources.
Oh yeah, I tell you what, this might knock you back in Hastings. I think it's more important to stop teenagers getting fatally... Yeah, I do. Yeah, it is. Yeah, absolutely. It's more important to try and prevent teenage boys being fatally stabbed in London than looking after this bunch of soap dodgers in Trafalgar Square. Yes, that's exactly right.
Well, okay, so that's your priorities. You think that's more important than protecting
and so you're telling me that throwing the personnel that they've had to, that is better, and allowing streets, not just in London now, the whole country, to not have the necessary police? Are you serious?
What are you talking about? Why on earth are they allocating resources to suppress a peaceful rebellion that's designed
What don't you
to make
get?
all of our lives
What
better?
don't you understand? Yesterday they sought to disrupt an airport and prevent people from flying, whether it is on business or holiday, to see relatives or whatever. They actually put themselves and passengers in danger. The police have to stop that. You can't just let these people wander around airports.
You have changed your tune, Nick.
What?
You have changed your tune, because a minute ago you were complaining about people getting to work. Now you're saying you're putting people in danger.
You are.
But
Of course. Getting up and running down an aircraft as it's just about to take off, aborting a takeoff. They had to abort a takeoff, Andy, at City Airport. Now, I'm sure they did it successfully. I'm sure it was fun. But that's not what planes are meant to do, right? Hence the word abort
I'll tell you
takeoff.
what police are meant to do. Police are not meant to raid people's garages on the precept they might be using some tents to put them at Millennium Park.
Lovely.
So they had a
Fantastic.
operation where they
Excellent. Not only would I raid their garages, I'd like to raid their homes, and if I could, I would raid their bank accounts, because they brought nothing but disruption to this city.
Nick, you're an advocate of a police state, and we're all advocates of clean air.
Oh, I'll tell you what. Why don't we have it your way? Why don't Extinction Rebellion run the country? They can't even spray paint the right way. How long do you think this country could survive with those hopeless dolts who can't even paint a wall, and they manage to paint themselves? Then you want them to run the hospitals? Dear God!
You call people hopeless dolts.
Yeah, dead right.
Because you have a political bias.
No, if you can't direct a hose from a fire engine the correct way, I would suggest you're a hopeless dolt. You have a campaign, and I respect the campaign, and undoubtedly there is an issue with climate change. You don't solve it by spraying yourself with red paint, chum.
We were pioneers in the Industrial Revolution, and we can be pioneers again in the Green Revolution, and I think that's really important.
Well, we are. The country will be carbon neutral. It's pledged to be carbon neutral by 2050.
2050 is too far away. I mean, you've got the United Nations, the IPCC, telling us we need to act within 12 years.
Right.
We've set a target of 2025, and we think, you know, if politicians say that isn't possible, we say the world is going to die.
Right, so that means, as you're probably aware, all petrol cars must be gone in 5 years. 5 years, Mr. Lockwood. That is wholly unrealistic.
Well, what we're calling for is a plant-based food system.
Address that.
What we're saying is that we are calling for a plant-based food system. We think that is the easiest thing
never mind
to do.
about plant-based food systems. You want all petrol cars gone in 5 years. That is utterly impossible. You must realise that. So when will you and your colleagues stop painting walls and realise this country could it do a little more? Possibly, but it's doing a hell of a lot. Why won't you accept that?
We do accept that, but we actually think we need to do a lot more, not just a little bit more.
So you do think, right, so I think that paints you into a corner, because the idea you could get rid of all petrol-driven cars in 5 years. Let me ask you this. Your sister organisation, Extinction Rebellion, released a video yesterday apologising to everyone and said, we have tried everything else. What have you tried?
There have been decades of climate change activism, and I know that.
Why don't you set up a political party?
Political parties such as the Green Party have been campaigning on some similar platforms. Well, that's the whole point. That's the point. We have tried other things, haven't we? We've tried the political way, and it hasn't worked. In May, Parliament declared a climate and ecological emergency, but there's been no action on that as the government dithers over Brexit. And Brexit is obviously critical for this country to get resolved. But the climate change, the climate emergency is a real issue.
Coming back to your goal lastly, Mr. Lockwood, everyone listening to this who has a gas boiler will need to turn to electric or other forms within 5 years to hit the target you expect by 2025. That's, again, impossible. Why don't you have realistic goals?
Well, we are asking the government to act, and if the government needs... It means the government needs to take the climate emergency seriously, and we don't think they are. And if we shift them, maybe
They've
a
said
little
we'll
bit
have
more
zero
than a little
carbon,
bit.
net zero by 2050.
Yes,
they have
and
taken it seriously.
Well, no, they haven't, because actually the United Nations and many other organisations are saying we do not have that time left, and that's why people are on the streets. People are worried. We are ordinary people, and we have
yes,
families.
It's ordinary people who can't work as well.
They're just ripping the tents apart. Some protester here asking me if I'm a public relations officer for the police. No, I'm not. Why? What makes you say that?
Who are
What's
you?
your protest? We're from Sky News.
Oh, you're from Sky News?
Yes.
Okay.
So what's your issue with what we've been saying?
Sorry, what have I seen? No, there's no issue.
Right.
I think up until a few months ago, I'd never heard of Extinction Rebellion. Who founded it? Who funds it?
So it's mostly funded, it's crowdsourced, basically. So we're funded from a huge host of individual donors who sign up and crowdsource us.
Now, is it true that your protesters, those who are camping out on the streets of London, are actually being paid to do this?
So many of those people who are camping out on the streets of London are there because they've taken 2 weeks off work to come to London because of the severity of the emergency that we face. They recognise the need to be in the capital and to highlight the emergencies.
Well,
the vast majority of people receive no payment whatsoever.
So some people are paid to do that?
Some people are paid living expenses from Extinction Rebellion because they are committed full-time to working for Extinction Rebellion. And interestingly, in terms of enabling a whole swathe of society to come and work for us, we're not saying you have to do this for free. We're saying wherever you come from within society, whether you're privileged, whether you're working class, if you're committed to Extinction Rebellion, you can come and work for us and we will cover your costs so you can do it. You do not have to be privileged to volunteer for us.
Do you understand the argument? I mean, if I was a London taxi driver, right, I would say to you, there are people being paid to sit in the street to stop me earning a living. Do you understand how upset some people in central London are by your behaviour?
Yes, of course. And the whole philosophy of Extinction Rebellion is to disrupt. That's what we set out to do. There's no easy way of saying that. And every time I say that, I sit in studios and I say to somebody, I am setting out to disrupt your everyday life. I feel very, very uncomfortable about it. And it's accepting that it's been the lack of action for over 30 years from our governments that has meant that we have had to take this action to raise these issues. Now, if we stand on the streets and hand out leaflets, nobody takes any notice of us. The politicians don't take any notice of us. And interestingly, Nigel, the only reason I'm on this programme today is because we've camped out on the streets of London for the last week.
No, to some extent that's true. But if you really want to move this on, look, I am somebody who 26 or 7 years ago, I took the view that our relationship with the European Union was heading in the wrong direction. I wanted to do something about it. I found at the time there were no more than a couple of dozen people in Westminster who were even interested, frankly, in the issue. And so I had a point of view that was very, very, very polar opposite to where political debate in Britain was. And so what did I do? Well, I went out and campaigned around the country, helped form political parties, gained elected representation, and managed to succeed. I don't think I've ever broken the law in doing what I'm doing. So isn't the real argument here that we are a peaceful, democratic society and that what you've brought to London is frankly anarchy in the last week?
So that's a really good question. And the idea that we can address the ecological emergency via our democratic system has been one that has been taken forward over the last 30 years. We've tried very, very hard, like through the Green Party, through motions, through campaigning, through marching. We've tried very, very hard to do that, to raise it up the agenda. And to be honest, we haven't done it as well as you raised the issue of our relationship with Europe.
Maybe your problem, Sarah, maybe your problem is that you're making claims that are frankly hysterical. I mean, your website, hang on. Your website says that there is the possibility of billions dying. That is just not credible, is it?
So I'm sat in an LBC studio here and I'm watching BBC News on the screens, and I'm watching pictures of houses being washed away in Japan because they've just had the worst typhoon in 60 years to hit Japan. So our weather, right now, is becoming more extreme. Millions of people no longer have electricity in California because they... Can you let me answer the question? Thank you very much. They've had their electricity turned off because of wildfires. At the moment, we are heading for a 4-degree increase in temperature. Okay, by 2100, that's 4 degrees. The weather we've grown up with no longer exists. At 4 degrees, scientists from the Potsdam Institute have said, I cannot see how the Earth can support 1 billion, let alone 500 million people. That is billions of people dying. The risk is there. We are running that risk.
Sarah, I'm sorry, but this extreme weather story is utter nonsense.
No, it's not.
You know, even the UN's IPCC, even they, who have been set up to actually prove that global warming happens, I mean, even they say they have very low confidence in the level at which global warming could lead to high risks associated with extreme weather. We have had, if you think back through centuries and millennia, we've had earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, storms. I mean, we've seen elephants walking across the Thames, and yet, a couple of centuries before that, Greenland had little snow on it. We've seen huge changes in climate, huge extreme weather events, and if even the IPCC say that, in fact, extreme weather is not related at the moment to climate change, why do you believe that it is?
So we haven't had huge changes in weather and climate over the last 10,000 years. It's been an incredible, stable period. And our weather is becoming more extreme. The Bahamas, they have just had the strongest hurricane to hit the Bahamas in the Northern Hemisphere ever. It's flattened the Bahamas. Every weather event, every extreme event that we have is preceded by the next most extreme weather event. We've had the hottest year on record, which preceded the last hottest year on record. There's no way that we can get away from the fact that our scientific measurements are telling us we are warming up and our weather is becoming more and more extreme.
Climate change. Of course I agree with climate change. It's a constant thing. The climate is always changing. But your obsession in Extinction Rebellion and the global warming movement is all with carbon dioxide. Okay? A couple of points to make on that. The first one is, what is it you actually want? Bear in mind, of course, that in terms of CO2 emissions, this country is between 1% and 2% of the world. I mean, we are very, very small in this game. Indeed. What is it you actually want the government to do? I mean, would people be able to go to Marbella on their holidays? Would they be able to own, a 4x4 motor car? What is it you actually think government needs to do? And government here has actually already made a commitment that I think's impossible to keep, of saying that by 2050 we'll be, zero net neutral on carbon. But you want this to happen by 2025. To do that, we would effectively have to close down the whole of British industry, wouldn't we?
We would have to totally refocus British industry. It would be a mobilisation like we did in 1939. Whatever happens...
It's the opposite, isn't it? In 1939, we built factories to produce munitions for war. Presumably...
Actually, we refocused our factories, Nigel, is what we did. We took the infrastructure that was in place and we refocused it towards the war effort. And also what we also did was we rationed what was available and brought the country together. We unified the country and we mobilised to fight a common enemy. Unfortunately, the enemy that we're looking at the moment, we can't see it. But it is there, and that's why we're calling for zero carbon by 2025
so steel would
to
go,
defend and protect.
Chemical production would go, refining would go. What would we have left?
So the choices that we're looking at are really, really grim. And that's why Extinction Rebellion is asking for a citizens' assembly. So the people come together to decide how and what the change that is required looks like. Rather than politicians sitting in Westminster and saying to us, you have to do this, you need to do that. We bring together
How?
Well, we do it in various ways. We already do it for juries, for example, and in the past, juries decided life or death of people. We bring it together using
Who brings them together?
Okay, there's a number of people who are already running citizens' assemblies. There's external bodies. You ask a body of people to set up the citizens' assembly. You bring together people from across the United Kingdom, so it represents people in terms of their age, in terms of their social status, in terms of their wealth. You get a cross-section of people. You explain to them, you educate, and then you ask their opinion of how we move forward. It's what the Irish did with regard to the abortion question, which was very controversial.
And then what do? Do you put this to a referendum? You
implement it through government. You have to keep the structures of the state in place.
An appointed citizens' assembly would tell government what to do.
They would lead and advise government, and it then becomes very difficult for government to say we are not going to do this because it has been requested by the people, by representatives of the people.
I have to say, I'm very sceptical about that.
Well, Nigel, I offer an invitation to you? What I would like to do is to offer an invitation to you to come and understand about citizens' assemblies.
I've seen them in
and
Brussels.
how radical they are. And I would also like to invite you to come and meet with some climate scientists and to actually understand the issues around the science and why what we face is so grave and why we say we are looking at the extinction, not only of the animals around that we love and cherish, but also we face the risk, the possibility of the extinction of human beings.
Yeah,
we are on the endangered list.
I don't think I haven't spoken to scientists on both sides of this argument over the years I have. One final point.
So is that a yes or a no, Nigel? Will you come and meet with us?
I'm very happy to sit with scientists representing both sides of the argument and have a proper debate, absolutely. But it needs to be a proper debate, and that's really, really important. You know, when I heard Tony Blair say a few years ago on this issue that the science was settled, I thought that is ridiculous. No science is ever settled. Science is always something that is open to debate and amendment going forwards. I want to ask you one question.
Yeah, but I didn't understand if it was a yes or a no to meet.
If I can come and meet people on both sides of the argument and objectively listen to what both have to say, yes.
I'm not sure there's many scientists on the other side of the argument.
There are plenty. I promise you. There are plenty.
So that's a yes, that you'll come and
if they're
meet.
Both. But why is it? See, we had a caller this week. I was debating this in the week. I had a caller ring in from Broadstairs in Kent, and he was in charge of the local beach cleaning charity. And, you know, they go out and clear up plastics and cigarette butts and all the rest of it off our beaches, something which I support and I'm sure you would support as well. He said, it's really interesting. I put big appeals out in the local newspapers and through the internet for volunteers to come along and help do beach cleaning. He said, nobody under 50 ever turns up. And I do wonder about this. If CO2 is what you're worried about, and clearly it is, that is, you know, the theory is it's CO2 increase that is leading to a warming of the climate. The one real antidote for that, as I understand it, are that trees absorb lots of carbon dioxide. Why don't you guys, rather than just protesting, blocking up the streets in London, why don't you guys become part of a national campaign to reforest the United Kingdom? You know, we've really got only about a quarter of the woodland and forestry that we had just going back a few centuries. You get two benefits from that. Number one, a lot more CO2 would be absorbed. Number two, if we plant the right trees in the right places, in terms of our general biodiversity, we'd be in a great place. I don't see. Here's my problem. I see your campaign as being negative. Where are the positives?
So once you get into providing solutions, you then start arguing about solutions. And when Extinction Rebellion started, the idea and the severity of the climate of the emergencies that we face was not even on the agenda. The truth of the risk we are facing, that our children are facing, still is not being told. And so Extinction Rebellion main aim is to tell the truth, to request zero carbon by 2025, because that is what is needed to give us a chance of avoiding catastrophic and runaway heating of our planet, and to use democracy via the Citizens' Assembly, upgrade democracy to find the solution to it. If we ask people, if we say we're facing an emergency and what I want you to do is go out and plant a few trees, it doesn't really feel like what we're asking you to do is commensurate with the risk that we are saying you are facing.
Would a global reforestation plan solve the problem?
It would not solve the problem, but using our
it would help.
Using plants, using trees, using sequestration through agriculture is absolutely one of the things that we need to do and that we need to get started on. And I would imagine that would be something that a Citizens' Assembly would.
Yeah. Well, I have to say, of all the things you've said, the Citizens' Assembly frightens me the most because I worry who'd be on it. But hey, I tell you what, we've had a good conversation here about Extinction Rebellion. I hope you've all learnt a bit more about who they are, what they believe. What do you think? Do you think this is hysterical and over the top and very, very potentially undemocratic, or do you think it's vital and it's important work?
Just bringing you in quickly, why are you here?
I'm here actually because I'm a Christian, and because, as far as I'm concerned, loving your neighbour is Jesus told us to do that. And
this has got nothing to do with Jesus.
It's absolutely everything to do with Jesus. The 4 members up there are members of Christian Climate Action, and they are Christians. And
I never heard I've read the bits of the Bible. I've never heard Jesus talk about the environment.
I am not going to go through the game of trying to persuade anybody from the Bible, particularly the one particular bit. I know that if I've got to love my neighbour, and I was in Uganda last year, and I could see the effects of climate change on the spot at the time. Right now, I love my neighbour by doing what I can right now to love people, and the people around the world and here right now are affected by climate change, and I have a duty to love people, to follow Jesus in loving people, and that is...
Okay, thanks, Jim. There you have it, Nick. It's all to do with...
I tell you what, Theo, just ask Jim, how are you loving your neighbour if you make him homeless because he can't pay his mortgage?
I was looking, when I came here this morning, I looked at people on the station, and I could see there were people who were doing menial jobs. You could tell.
Yeah, but they need to pay their rent.
Yeah. Absolutely understand that. And you know, this is something that takes me out of my comfort zone, and I don't like doing this.
But who are you to say? Who are you to say that they cannot get to work on time because then they have to stay late, so they don't get home to see their kids, they can't pay their rent, they can't pay their mortgage? What makes Jim, 62, the arbiter? What gives you the right to make that decision?
What we're trying to do is to say the disruption that is happening now is regrettable, but the disruption that we are causing now is nothing to the disruption that will happen if the government and around the world do...
But these people aren't the government. These people are just trying to earn money.
But what happens is that when there is disruption that comes to a small little location over there, or an office over there, or a company over there, it doesn't get noticed. But unfortunately, the way things have to work is that to bring it to people's attention, we have to do something that is really public.
But that's unfair on these people.
It is unfortunate, but it's still true that those people who are going to be impacted by this action today are going to be... what we want to see is the benefit for everybody, that if the government acts for...
But this isn't the government. These are people on 25 grand a year, sometimes much less than that, trying to earn money to pay their mortgages, to do their kids' football class, whatever it is. And I just don't get why you have the right to make that call.
Because we have the right to say what is going to make a difference.
Exactly.
What is going to make a difference in the long run? In the long run,
you're doing them a favour
because we're waking them up to the disruption that's going to happen later on.
Thank you very much. Thank you both very much.
An incandescent Theo Usherwood reporting there from Canary. Great work, Theo. So we learn now that it's actually Jesus' idea to make sure that people can't keep a roof over their head, and something called Christian climate change, and all these protesters should be on pedestals. We were just hearing from one of our reporters, this actually hits you where, well, not where you live, but where you work. Apparently some protesters, or a protester, has glued himself to the front of the Department for Transport offices. We can confirm it's not Chris Grayling, but what would you be saying to this person?
Yeah, I mean, it does make it very, very difficult for people to legitimately go about the job. Like, you know, in the Department for Transport, we're trying to help the entire country go about its work. We've just helped to rescue 150,000 people. How does stopping that department going about its work help ordinary people? And the irony is, this is one of the departments in government that is doing the most to combat climate change. For example, only last week I was talking about bringing forward the end of the sale of petrol and diesel cars from 2040 and looking at going to 2035. I drive an electric car. They're terrific. I think it's the way forward. But it doesn't help if climate protesters make it harder for government to go about doing some of the things which are going to help with this climate change. And I hear them say, oh, the government's not doing anything. Nonsense. They are protesting in the country in the world that is doing the most to tackle climate change, is running up to, you know, half of its power source through wind and electricity, has decarbonised by running very little coal and will have it extinguished entirely very soon. They could actually usefully go to the countries which are not doing everything Britain's doing, rather than disrupting the livelihoods of people in Britain.
So just for an update, I'm on top of a plane. There it is. On top of a British Airways plane, London City Airport, to draw attention to government inaction on climate and ecological breakdown. Yeah, I can see plenty of bright yellow stuff going on. Myself, really shaky, hate heights. I don't know how the hell I got up here. I don't know how the hell I'm going to get down again. Oh man. I'm going to have to stop this live stream. I'm going to have to stop. I'm too scared.
I'm feeling quite moved at the moment because I've just been watching people being taken away and oh, sorry. It's just very moving seeing people kind of giving their, you know, their freedom and, you know, giving so much of their lives. You know, most of the people who've been doing this have been working really hard over the last weeks and months and years even. You know, some people have been working at it for years, trying to raise the warning about climate change. And, you know, this I just sort of really feel this is our last chance, you know, to try and turn things round. We still have a chance to turn things round. If we stop now producing carbon emissions, if we don't turn it round this time, that's it, you know. That's it for the people in the future, but also for our ancestors, you know. I really feel, you know, the legacy that we've inherited from people who've done civil disobedience in the past, non-violent civil disobedience like Martin Luther King and Gandhi, you know, they all fought for freedom and for human rights and for the, you know, for the rights for life on Earth, you know, well, they've handed the torch on to us. So,
and what about here this morning? You've carried out, or people have carried out this action outside the Department of Defence. Why here?
Yeah, because one of the things that's going to happen as a result of climate change is that crops will be failing in this country. It's already started happening. You know, crops are already failing, and that's just going to get worse. And as crops fail in this country and other countries, we're going to start seeing wars break out. We've already seen that in Syria. You know, so some of that. You know, one of the variables in the Syrian war was climate change. People being, you know, having to leave the land in order to find somewhere else. So that's going to be happening here in this country as well.
And describe to me what's been happening here over the last hour or so. You said there have been arrests. How many?
I don't know how many arrests. I think at least 12. I don't know what was happening at that end, but yeah, people were blocking the road peacefully. I was very carefully flagging down the traffic to make sure that nobody would be hurt, and just explaining to the drivers how we're really sorry. you know, and it's a hard job actually talking to the drivers, because I hate disrupting people's lives. That's not what I'm here to do, but I am here to try and raise the alarm about climate change, and that's the only way we can do it now. I've been campaigning on this issue for 30 years, and I've tried every other method to try and, you know, get the message across. And people are not listening, or you know, if they are listening, they're not doing anything about it. So this is, you know, this is what we have to do now. We have to disrupt people's lives in order to, you know, get the message out there to people.